What are some of the critical, and we don't have time, what are some of the critical things that must happen under the PCI for the country to be in a strong position by the end of the program when you do your final review in May 2029? Basically, why should the operations of the gold board not be on the books of the Bank of Ghana? Why do you think that the BOG should not do what you call quasi-fiscal operations?
On what you said about the rating, and so the DSA, the debt sustainability analysis, basically at the end of the ECF showed that the rating has been upgraded from high risk of debt distress to moderate risk of debt distress, and this is first time after 13 years. So it's a huge achievement, I would say, and it's 2 years before we were expecting that to happen. All macro indicators, all debt sustainability indicators have improved, and they are below the thresholds. Now, if you look at public debt, only central government, it reached 45% of GDP level. Okay, that is also what we hope to achieve in 2034. Which is over the medium term, if you want. Okay. Now, part of the expenses in the government, and now I want to come back to your question about borrowing costs. So a large share of the expenses on the budget side are interest expenses. Okay, about 1/3.
Yes.
And what the government needs to do is basically to lower those costs to make space, fiscal space, for other development needs, to pay salaries, and for social spending. And you mentioned CapEx. So if you want to ramp up CapEx spending, then you need more space in your budget. Part of that CapEx spending can be financed domestically with domestic revenue mobilization, for instance. But domestic revenue mobilization is a very slow animal, as we have seen, right? It moves like a worm. Yeah. So what we need is to ramp up domestic revenue mobilization, and at the same time to get more of the financing savings on the domestic side to be put into government securities and so on. But I would say that that's also the government basically competes with the private sector, and that's where we hope the growth would be led from. The private sector should be the one creating jobs and boosting growth. So part of those resources in the domestic economy are going to the private sector. And we have seen recently private credit increasing even 40% year on year based on the latest statistics from the Bank of Ghana.
Wonderful. Does the review identify the overdependence on gold, and how does it propose the country reduces its vulnerability to that single commodity as its lead export driver?
So first, let me say that the recovery is sustainable if the reform momentum continues. I would say the key risk is policy complacency.
Okay.
That's the number one risk. Other risks obviously include weaker commodities, gold in particular you mentioned, but also it could be cocoa prices, it could be energy prices, which are all jointly affecting the current account balance. Now, on the other risks that the economy has, we have seen climate shocks also important, and geopolitical tensions can also lead to tightening of global financial conditions, higher energy prices, etc. So I would say there are a multitude, a plethora of risks around us. And I agree with you that gold, because of the concentration on the export side, gold prices are is a relevant risk for the economy, and that's why diversification is key. So moving into agro-processing, manufacturing, all the other services that are needed in the economy is key for the economy to remain resilient, and at the same time continue to build buffers, both external and domestic, is important to stay on top of the risks and the shocks.
Basically, why should the operations of the gold board not be on the books of the Bank of Ghana? Why do you think that the BOG should not do what you call quasi-fiscal operations? Explain that first.
Okay, so let's clarify a few things. First, gold plays a central role to the economy, and that helped higher export proceeds, helped with the stabilization of the cedi, helped with rebuilding reserves. Okay, so we have established that. Secondly, the lessons from the domestic gold purchase program are also that we need to be careful about governance, transparency, reporting, and care about the costs incurred by the program. Now, the IMF analysis basically shows that the DGPP throughout its history has led to significant losses to the BOG, which ended up with equity of negative 7% at the end of roughly 7% at the end of 2025. Part of that was driven by the DDP. Part of it was driven by the DGPP, the Domestic Gold Purchase Program. So the main point here is that the central bank cannot be involved in this activity, quasi-fiscal activity, because its balance sheet is deteriorating, and that basically can interfere with its primary mandate, which is price stability. Okay, so how it can interfere is basically the central bank has operational costs, and it has cost for sterilization, and if it decides that this is too expensive, then it affects their balance sheet. They might not do that, and then you will see prices skyrocketing, and that's not something that we want to go back. So we want them to maintain price stability as their primary objective, and that's in the second one is central bank independence. That's key. When you talk about fiscal dominance, basically lending to the government, you need an independent central bank. The BOG should not lend to government entities. They should get that financing from the markets, from the commercial banks. So now basically the operations have been moved from the BOG to Goldbod, both buying and selling of gold, and therefore the government, together with Goldbod, will need to think thoroughly about financing model, about how to minimize the costs and at the same time maximize the benefits of this program. So in a way, it's not, I would say the move is the first step. We have seen the government taking steps to, let's say, reduce the costs. There were 15% in 2025. They're on the path to reducing that to 5%. And then they need to think whether scaling up this program can be sustained in the long term.
What about the cocoa sector? I know the new cocoa bill has generated a bit of controversy. How important is the new reforms for the cocoa sector in making it viable? What are your thoughts on the cocoa sector?
So the cocoa sector issues have been persistent for a few years, yeah. Right? And we have seen in 2025-26, the season 25-26, when prices basically collapsed, that Cocoa Board was in difficulty of making payments to farmers, to LBCs, and so on. Now, those issues basically came on top of structural inefficiencies at Cocoa Board. So the new cocoa bill which basically tries to address some of the issues in the turnaround strategy of cocoa board, are basically referring to the financing model, domestic financing or a mix between domestic and external